Hi guys, my name is Brenna, and this is the birth story of our firstborn daughter who was just born 10 days ago. Okay, so I am at 6 centimeters right now. The baby's heart rate was dropping because I was having really prolonged contractions, so they had to give me something to slow down the contractions. But again, we've been here since 4. Labor started at 11:30 last night, and it went pretty fast. Contractions were less than a minute apart and lasting 2 to 3 minutes, so pretty painful. So I decided that it was time to get an epidural, and I do not regret it whatsoever. But yeah, hopefully her heart rate maintains, and they have Pitocin dripping right now, and they're just going to keep an eye on it. So that's where we're at. When I got here, I was 4 to 5 centimeters and pretty much 100% effaced, and 0 station. So hopefully 4 to 5 hours till she's here. That's it. Our daughter was born October 15th, just 10 days ago at 3:15 p.m. after 15 hours of labor and an urgent C-section. I had gone into my whole birth plan and everything wanting to have a natural delivery, and definitely did not want to have an epidural, let alone a C-section. Basically, my birth plan and everything I had planned just went completely out the window. Saturday night at 11:30 p.m. I had been in bed for probably about an hour and a half sleeping, and I woke up to really bad back pain. And this being my first labor, I had never felt really what contractions were. So I thought, I didn't really even know that it was labor. I was having just really bad back pain, and so I woke my husband up at midnight and told him what was going on. I tried to take a warm bath and it didn't go away. The weird thing was I couldn't time the contractions, I guess. They seemed like they were constant, and it was almost just like a jab in my back that I would get, and then I would get 30 seconds to a minute later. So I really didn't even think I was in labor. I thought I was just dying or something. I don't know. It was really awful. I tried to stay at home for a while. I got on the birthing ball, and that helped out a little bit. I was still waiting to have these contractions that I had heard about, or wait for my water to break, because I didn't want to go to the hospital and be sent home, especially in the amount of pain I was in. I couldn't even imagine sitting in the car and then having to sit in the car again to come back home. So I just tried to push off going to the hospital as soon as as far along as I could. So finally, around 4 a.m., my husband said we had to go. At this point, I thought I was in transition. I couldn't talk, I couldn't do anything during the contractions. So we went ahead to the hospital, and again, the whole drive to the hospital, I couldn't even sit down. The pain was just excruciating. I thought we might have to even pull over just so I can brace myself. I would just kind of get down on all four, and at that point I had been puking when I would get down because of the pain. So we got to the hospital. About 15 minutes later, went to triage. At triage, they could tell that I was farther along than I thought. Maybe I was at 2 centimeters because that's what I was before I went into labor. But they said I was already at 5 centimeters, so they went ahead and admitted me. I was 100% effaced, and I was my cervix was completely thinned out. So after that, they put me in a wheelchair and took me to the labor and delivery. And they asked me while I was in triage, actually, what my pain management plan was. And again, we had taken the birthing class. I was 100% sure I could handle doing this without an epidural. But when I was thinking about it that way, I was thinking I would have contractions 4 to 5 minutes apart and then have a good little break so I could breathe and brace myself for the next contraction. But I couldn't even get control of myself after. They were 30 seconds to a minute apart, so each contraction was just stacked. So when they came in and did the epidural, they had to wait because I kept having contractions nonstop. So I was having a contraction while they were trying to give me the epidural. So that's kind of how that went. The epidural took a little bit to kick in, but once it did, I was so grateful that it kicked in. I could not imagine going through 15 hours of pain like that. So about a half hour after I got the epidural, I was laying in bed. This was about 6:30 a.m. and I was fine. I didn't even know when I was having contractions. The nurses could see it on the screen, and at that point they had already come in and they made a comment that they felt bad because I was having each contraction so close to each other before the epidural. So at 6:30 I had a really long, prolonged contraction, and that particular one made our daughter's heart rate drop. It was 150 before that, but it made it drop down to 90. So as soon as that happened, the doctor and then a resident and a med student and the nurses all came in and were trying to figure out what was going on. So the doctor said that they would have to give me terbutaline, which is just a drug to slow down or stop contractions. So they gave that to me, and it really did slow things down. The doctor went ahead and broke my water and hooked the baby up to something so they could monitor her heart rate a lot better than they could by the straps that were on my belly. So after an hour of that, I obviously hadn't progressed, and they decided to go ahead and give me Pitocin to get things rolling along. Again, with the Pitocin, it just wasn't making things go like it was before I had the terbutaline. I had progressed till what the resident thought was 7 centimeters, but the doctor came in again and said I was only at 6 centimeters, and this was 8 hours later. So even on the Pitocin, they would have me switch from side to side because the baby's heart rate was still dropping. I would lay on my left side and it would drop a little bit, so they had to stop the Pitocin drip a couple times. And so really I shouldn't have been on the Pitocin at all. So 8 hours later, they decided to go ahead with the C-section. I at this point, of course, was very emotional. I definitely, this was like my worst nightmare. I didn't want to have a C-section. I had planned, this amazing delivery where I could grab the baby myself and the doctor would get her head and her shoulders out, but we had planned it so that I could grab her and be the first to hold her. And that was, I had dreamed about this times for so long. So just thinking about having a C-section and all the dangers that go along with that were really upsetting. But they went ahead and started things immediately. They came in and gave me another epidural. My husband scrubbed out and they got me all ready. So I went in to have the C-section, and by the time they had started getting me ready, I was puking. I was just in an awful state. And the nurse had explained to me everything that was going to happen. I couldn't feel really I obviously couldn't feel the incisions, or I couldn't feel them cutting me. But when it came to the part where they would be pulling the baby out, she said I would feel a lot of pressure. So I was laying there holding onto my husband's hand, and it was just like a lot of pressure, like they said. But when it came time to pull the baby out, it was the most excruciating pain. And I've been through, I feel like I have a high pain tolerance. I've been through boot camp, I run marathons, I suffer from migraines. I feel like I have been through a lot of pain in my life, but there's nothing to describe how that felt. So they couldn't get the baby's head out, and that's kind of why it was taking so much longer. They said it would be a quick one and done. They would just pull her out after I felt the pressure. But her head was actually stuck in my pelvis, and they had to go up through my vagina and try to push her head out while they had a vacuum attached to her head. And I was just sitting there, laying there thinking, what is going on? Why is this taking so long? And then my husband, of course, was concerned because it was taking so long, and the bed was literally shaking as they were trying to wiggle her head out of my pelvis. So after they finally got her out, we didn't hear any crying. My husband had at that point gone over with her. They gave her some assisted breathing, and he at that point was just with her from then on out, and I was just on the bed. They were trying to manage the pain and had to put me under general. I could not even catch my breath. They hooked me up to oxygen. It was just, I was in a really bad state at that time. So they put me under for about 20 minutes, and then when I woke up, it's still kind of a blur. I don't really remember much. Someone was taking pictures, so that's all I can remember from the pictures. But they gave her to me, and then they started having me breastfeed with her right away. And so after they had me do some skin to skin with her, they put me back in the recovery room for 2 hours. And again, I had my family drove up, and my in-laws drove up. Each of them, it was about a 7-hour drive. So I was excited to see my family, but we had to sit there for a couple hours. And I just remember looking at her thinking, at this point I was still kind of cloudy-eyed and I couldn't really think straight. But I was emotional to see her, but I was just also emotional because I couldn't really process everything that had happened because it all happened so fast. Even though I had been in labor for 15 hours, I thought that labor was going to be ending with me pushing her out and having the euphoria and all the feelings that go along with delivery. So after coming out of recovery, they rolled me into what would be my family suite, and my family was waiting in the hall, my in-laws were waiting, and of course at that time I'm just on this all-time high. I have my baby, I have everything I've ever wanted, and I still am not really processing everything that happened. So that was it for the C-section. I was told that basically, so my pelvis was too narrow for them to be able to push her out through my cervix, and then for them to get her head out. My pelvis was too narrow, so for future deliveries I'll have to do the same thing. I'll have to have a C-section, otherwise I'll probably end up in the same state where I'm laboring for hours and then they have to do an urgent C-section, essentially putting my daughter's life and my life in danger. And just because it took so long for them to get her out, I lost a lot of blood and they had to give me a lot of fluids. I didn't have to have a transfusion or anything, but the whole experience was definitely not what I had imagined and dreamt of. I was making a joke to my husband that basically everything that we had on our birth plan went out the window as far as pain management and what to do after she's here, with the skin to skin. The only thing that stayed the same was we didn't want her to have the eye drops because she didn't need the eye drops, and then also to have the vitamin K after she was born, but everything else went out the window. So I've definitely learned that with my next labor and delivery, I will not even, I guess we'll just schedule a C-section and that'll be it. But everything ended up great. Now I have a gorgeous baby girl who's actually napping. I'll go get her in a few seconds. But we were so blessed and lucky to have her. And I guess with like I said before, I even, went into labor, I didn't expect things to go according to plan, but I kind of had hopes. So I would just say to anyone that's getting ready to have a baby, just go in knowing that, like mine, your whole plan and your whole idea can just be completely turned upside down. The main goal to have when you're going to have a baby is just to have a safe and healthy baby, and there's not really much else you can do. It's out of our hands at that point. But I'll go ahead and go get her. Oh, I know. Alright, so this is our little prize from a long day. 100% worth it. And I'll see if you can see her little bow kind of covering her face. Oh, she is absolute perfection. She was 6 pounds, 12 ounces, and 19.75 inches. And she is a trooper. They said they've never seen a baby catch on to breastfeeding as fast as her. She does the, what do they call it, the audible swallowing. So she's definitely a growing little girl, but we just love her, and she is absolutely 100% worth the horrible day that I went through. And I really couldn't imagine anything better than holding her in my arms. So that's all I have for you guys today. I don't mean to scare anyone that's going into a C-section, but that was just my experience. And I don't know if I would do anything different. I don't know if I could do anything different. But like I said, as long as you end up with a healthy baby and that you're healthy, there's really nothing more you can ask for. So we are actually going to hit the road because she is headed to her grandma's house for the first time. So we will see you guys later in the next video.
Baby mine, don't you cry. Baby mine, dry your eyes. Rest your head close to my heart, never to part, baby of mine. Little one, when you play, pay no heed what they say. Let your eyes sparkle and shine, never a tear, baby of mine. If they knew all about you, they'd end up loving you too. All those same people who scold you, what they'd give just for the right to hold you. From your head down to your toes, you're not much, goodness knows, but you're so precious to me, sweet as can be, baby of mine.